I'm surprised you didn't have that before. I'm surprised you didn't have a back door.
Well, this wasn't used yet.
I know, but still, I would have thought even for storage
Depends on occupancy.
He said that this was almost meant to be one unit,
at one time.
which would have had to,
That would have been the door, yeah,
And there too.
yeah,
There's two.
makes sense.
We always have to have two ways to ingress, egress in there.
now see, here's your two front, and there's your two rear,
Yeah.
original, if
Yeah.
it being all one space.
She does all these scientific studies, reads all these parenting books, and just always has an answer for the, like, I don't care. I feel it's just being disrespectful.
Yeah, maximum at the time, and it's reasonable.
My phone is always about 3 minutes ahead, so I don't, it's always about 5 minutes off. That's good. I'd rather,
That's why it's hard enough to love your kid when it's your own kid.
So, it's part of the problem was the way they designed that building in that round.
He may have thought he could organize for storage, because
Yeah.
oh, we got some scouts
So I
here.
understand,
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
kid type
Yeah.
thing, so.
that's a very difficult place to be.
Stuff.
well,
I give a little peep.
We got one good one.
that's a two,
It does.
So I tell them, I'm like, look, I understand.
yeah, two,
Most pragmatic,
1 to 1.
this is what's going on. So, I mean, it's.
It gives you a distance that,
Are we on? We ready?
But I still get overloaded.
it's up front.
You good?
You all sit back there. Do we smell?
Those pins.
Everybody should just move up.
Remember how to do this thing?
A row guy.
I can't see after trying now, so. Get one in my office.
Yeah, I am going here.
You are going there? Yeah. Well, I'm going to that.
I mean, the governor's
Two.
breakfast.
I'm
Next week.
booked for that. But it was the breakfast.
Talking about whether or not breakfast, obviously, you probably want, you'll want to go and do what you need to do.
Good evening. This is the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for, what's the date today? February 9th. Welcome to the Boy Scouts. I assume you're here for merit badge, right? Well, take good notes. We will start by rising for a moment of silent prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I assume we don't have any changes. Move to approve?
Second.
No changes. We need
We have a motion and a second
Okay.
already.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is the mayor's report. I don't have anything real exciting to report tonight. Anybody have any news that you want to share with us?
We have our Black History, is it this Saturday, this Sunday? We have something going on this Sunday
I believe it is this Sunday afternoon here at Town Hall.
at 2.
Don't steal your thunder.
That's right. That's all right.
it?
Celebration, part of our celebration of Black History Month, we have
Oh,
an
yeah.
organization coming in and
Yeah.
putting on a play. Is it going to be in here, David, or is it in the community room?
Yeah, out there and in here.
Okay.
Usually it is in here.
Okay.
Anybody else? If not, then we go to Citizens Forum.
No one has signed up.
Signed up. So we go to approval of minutes from January 26th.
Move to approve?
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're already to business items. And the first one is approval of mid-year appointments to the Economic Development Committee and the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yes, sir. Samuel French and Scott Meyer have applied for the Economic Development position, and Michael Wilson has applied for the Board of Zoning Appeals position. And both of these are unfilled or unexpired terms on both of these committees. And so you'll need to choose between Samuel French and Scott Meyer for the Economic Development, and Michael Wilson is the only applicant for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
And am I correct in assuming there's only one opening on the Economic Development Committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
More openings in July. We have 4.
Four members will be rolling off in
July.
June, yeah.
Well, I'll make a motion that we appoint Samuel French for that position for the Economic Development Committee because I believe Scott Meyer's already on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And,
Correct.
And,
Yep.
he doesn't need to be on two, and we have an opportunity for some
I agree.
new blood.
Yep. I think, and Scott can certainly apply in July, which is,
Yeah.
coming up sooner than we think.
Okay, so that's a motion.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Do we need to do a second motion for Michael Wilson, or is that that's a done deal?
No, we gotta make.
Say, we ought to have some discussion on it. We,
That was French.
any discussion. Do we, does anybody know Mr. Wilson?
I do, yeah.
I do.
Is he currently serving on any position in town?
No.
No, he's not.
And he's gone through the Intro to Farragut program class.
Well, that's a pretty high recommendation. And he cared
And
enough
he was involved in, he got very involved when the apartments were up, and I really appreciated towards the end when there was a lot of discussion, he came and he was very factual, very, just to the point and
Not emotional.
Yes, and it was very helpful. I may not have agreed with all of his positions, but he gave us a lot of things to think about. So he's very thoughtful and very thorough.
So is that a motion?
Move to approve Michael Wilson to the Board of Zoning Appeals position.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. And the next business item is the approval of a communications equipment license agreement with Zayo Group LLC.
Okay, let me give you a little bit of overview of how we got to this point. This has actually been going on for, and Terry can attest to this, quite a while. But we think the end product's going to be a good one. This first came to the Planning Commission back in August when they reviewed 3 site plans for what are called small cell systems. Basically, those are just small-scale cellular towers. That's kind of a tongue twister. That can be located in public rights-of-ways, on light poles, utility poles, those kinds of things. They can even be on buildings outside the right-of-way. But they looked at 2 small cell locations on Parkside Drive, and these are basically typically go in areas where there's a lot of active cell phone usage. So Parkside Drive corridor obviously has a lot of people on their cell phones, and that's why this is an area that was selected. But they have 2 of these locations that are proposed on Parkside Drive in public rights-of-ways. And in each case, they would be replacing the existing light poles because in order to handle the additional weight of the antenna structure, they'll need to provide for new poles. One of the poles is located, one of the light poles is located in front of the Marshall store, kind of in the eastern part of the town's portion of Parkside Drive. And then the other one on Parkside Drive is just to the west of the Publix grocery store, kind of on the westernmost portion of the town's portion of Parkside Drive. And then there's a new pole that was being proposed on Campbell Lakes Drive near the access point into Elliott's Boots store. So that was what was presented to the Planning Commission, and that are shown on the screen as red dots are the 3 locations of what they're proposing at this time. When the site plans were presented to the Planning Commission, we talked with the Commission about ways of trying to conceal these things so that they're this is kind of a new technology for not just the town, but pretty much nationally. So we were kind of unprepared to address this in some ways. And what we were trying to do is work with the applicant to come up with the most concealed application that they could provide. And what the staff has always recommended is that try to provide as many of these structures underground, with, of course, the exception of the antenna. That was not what the Planning Commission ultimately required. They presented an above-ground structure that would be attached to the base of each of the poles. But subsequent to that, we have worked out through this lease agreement, and we're very appreciative of the applicant working with the town on actually providing these structures underground. The concern from the staff's perspective was not so much this one applicant, but this kind of technology and these kind of structures. I think we're going to see a lot more of these come before the town. And what we wanted to try to provide for, particularly on roads like Parkside Drive, where all the utilities are underground, was to encourage applicants to place as much of these structures underground as possible. So that's what is in the lease agreement that's before you, and they've agreed to. And again, we are appreciative of the applicant working with the town on that. We're hoping that once they get these installed, that these will be something we can point to as examples for people that want to add structures like this in the future. You know, we can say you need to go out and look at these structures on Parkside Drive, and that'll give you an idea of what we're looking for. The staff would recommend approval of the lease agreement. The applicant will need to provide more detailed site-specific plans for each of the 3 locations. They'll need to obtain a right-of-way permit from the town. We'll need to have a pre-construction meeting at each of the 3 sites to make sure that the applicant and the town staff are all on the same page about where these things are going, that there's not any conflicts with utilities or sidewalks or anything like that. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. We do have some representatives from ZAO here, and they can answer technical questions that you may have. But we do recommend approval of the agreement.
Mark, will the site plans go to the MPC?
I would not recommend that.
Okay.
They can, if that is what you all wish. We can take them back to the Planning Commission. But from my perspective, what they're proposing now is more desirable than what the Planning Commission ultimately recommended.
Yep.
So it's an improvement. And so I wouldn't recommend that they need to go back to the Planning Commission.
Are we reflecting that in our ordinance? Do we get that specific about the?
Yeah, I talked with Terry Davis today about some of these things, and I told him we were working on updating our telecommunications provisions, and they're going to set up these 3 locations so that they can accommodate an additional carrier.
Okay.
And that can be done with the vault.
Would it be a second antenna? Would it?
I'll let Terry address that. It
Okay.
depends on whether they can work out a lease agreement with Verizon, I believe, in this case.
Yeah, technically, we can share the antennas.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's the.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
For one additional carrier, we
Okay,
can share
so
antennas.
you have on this page page, what is it, page 6, which page is the?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Robert's rules state that there should be a motion on the table and a second before discussion, and then once discussion is concluded, that there should be a vote. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the communications equipment license agreement between the town of Farragut and Azeo Group LLC for 3 small cell locations in Farragut, in the Parkside Drive area.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well,
We don't have to vote on it, we just
need
have
to,
to
well, yeah, we just need,
have the.
once the motion and second have been
Oh, that's
made,
right.
then
we have
discussion can
discussion.
proceed, and then we can have a vote once the discussion is concluded.
Bob's trying to get us to be a little bit more formal, which we really appreciate, but we're dogged in our old ways, aren't we?
Old habits are hard to break.
Yes, they are. All right, I appreciate that. You have this antenna on, is it, you would share this one antenna, or you would have a second antenna like
They'll-
this one?
There would be an antenna array with 3 antennas.
Okay.
As the planning commission had asked.
Okay.
We plan to push those up right below the luminaire. They'll be
Okay.
painted the same color
Okay.
as the pole is, and we would share those antennas. We could share those with another carrier.
And are those antennas always at the, right at the top of the post?
They
or
don't
are
have to be. We can go at any RAD center. We have actually, our original RAD center that was requested from Verizon RF was lower.
Yep.
And during the planning commission's meeting under discussion, they had asked that could we push those up for aesthetics, and I went back to Verizon, they said absolutely.
Okay.
So right now, the plan is to push those to the top.
Okay. I think that was where because I remember we talking about that, and I thought originally that would, that antenna could be anywhere on the, I mean, I know we're only going to have one post here and one all the way down, so you're not going to see them all over the place, but eventually, who knows if we're going to have more
Exactly.
coming in from other carriers and,
Well, to me and Mark's discussion this afternoon, and I know you're working on getting some ordinances in. We just went through this with the city of Knoxville as well, and they leaned on us quite a bit for help on getting their ordinances in place. And, my suggestion would be that you cap a maximum pole height in your right of way. And, he had asked me today, is 35 feet acceptable? Is that workable? And it is. I mean, they capped it at 36 in Knoxville. So, that prevents people from coming in and wanting to put a 100-foot pole in your right of way. So, that's something. But as far as the RAD center on that pole, Verizon might want it at 22 feet. But again, I can't remember what it was. It was 28 or 29 feet. The pole, I think, pole height's close to a little over 30. So we were going to push all the way to the top, and with those antennas under the luminaire, it's not going to be as noticeable.
It's very unobtrusive, I think.
I've got a question. If you put more than one antenna, do you have to have more than one vault? Is there?
No, we would design the vault to have additional room for an additional carrier. So what will happen is they diplex those antennas. They'd have their own radio. We have enough fiber in that vault to service them. So if there's any construction, it would just be if we needed a second meter for them, it would only be a meter set. But there wouldn't be any fiber construction or any additional antennas. Everything else would be in that vault.
How many servers can you fit into a box?
Two's pretty much on these. These are so small of installs. You can only diplex those antennas to 2 carriers. So if you went to a third, you'd have to add additional antennas. And with that small a pole, you start having structural issues.
Anticipate ever going to 3 antennas?
No, I don't. Not on small cells.
Okay, so we wouldn't need a second vault. That's what I'm getting at.
No, you would not need a second vault.
What about the meter?
All right, so the meter, I was talking to Mark about that earlier. The best place for the meter is on the pole itself. What we would do is put it away, away from where the most of the traffic is. It would be painted the same color. Of course, not the meter itself, but the box, the apparatus would be painted the same color. The only other option is to put it on an H-frame away from the pole, which I think would probably be more noticeable. So if we were to paint the meter, and we'd have a small disconnect underneath it, these are going to be AC powered radios, so there will be no DC power. So we don't need a big, huge box with batteries and things like that. So there'll only be a small breaker with two breaker positions in it to run the equipment that's in the vault. So it'd be a very small disconnect below the meter itself. Those would be painted to match the.
The meters would be stacked.
Yeah, yes, they would be stacked. If we added a second, or what we would do is work out a deal that maybe we could sub-meter. Verizon could maybe, with that 1 meter, maybe they could charge back to the additional carrier a monthly fee for power. You know, it might be something we never had to use. We might could sub-meter it or do something like that. We have spoken to the utility. There's no way, they won't let us put the meter in the vault. We actually looked at that because they're reading them by, you know, they don't read them anymore. They're read electronically, but they won't let us put them in the vault. We actually tried it, so they will have to be on the pole.
I haven't read the entire equipment license agreement, but does it stipulate the maximum height on the poles?
Ordinance.
Technically, the agreement does not, but the agreement incorporates the approval that was granted by of the site plan that was granted by the planning commission, and that's the way the plan would be, that it would be that site plan that would govern the details of how it's to be done.
Well, from what I understand, one site plan has been submitted, but not all three. Is that correct?
What we did was the original plan was to submit 3 sets of options for you guys to look at. We settled on the underground option, which is the less obtrusive. So to hold the cost down on our side, we agreed to submit 1 set of drawings, being that most of these are almost identical in the look. We submitted 1 set of plans for 1 site, but each other set of plans would be with the approved installation. So the answer is yes. Short answer is yes.
So what is the height? And we talked about 35 feet just a minute ago. Is that
If I remember right, and I'm not looking at the plans, it's probably on the plans, but I think those poles are 30 feet if I remember correct. They'll be an exact match.
It'd be the same height as the light poles are now. I don't recall the exact number.
They'll be an exact match.
Match our existing light poles.
38.
Yeah.
And nothing on here.
To match.
38 foot right here.
It says 38 on the plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, those will match what's there. So,
Okay. And the third pole, the Campbell Lakes location, that's going to be the same as these?
it'll be a match for what's already there as well.
Okay.
Which is different than these.
And that's probably one thing you need to look at when you're looking at ordinance. If you cap your height, one thing you don't want to handcuff yourself into is if you've got a 40-foot existing pole and they need to replace it, you don't want them replacing it with a smaller pole. Right. So you'll want to try to cover that. I'm sure you've thought of that. But in this case, we're going 38 feet because that's the existing pole height. They'll be identical match. Those are fiberglass poles. These will be steel poles to handle the weight of the antennas.
You alluded to this, but I'll ask this question. Is Knoxville doing the same thing on their end of Turkey Creek at the same time as we're doing it?
We have one site, one node in Turkey Creek. It's across right over by the Cracker Barrel and all that there. They have since we're sitting a new pole there, there's not an existing. We'll have the pole we're sitting there will be 35.5 feet, which is 6 inches under their maximal allow.
How about over in Cedar Bluff, that Cracker Barrel?
Yeah, it's over by the Cracker Barrel. If you pull in the backside of Cracker Barrel, on the right there's like a little strip mall there that's got some things in it there. I can't remember the businesses that are in there, but there's actually a LCUB pole line there, transmission pole line that runs along there. And I think there's a hotel over there too.
Yeah.
We talking about the one in Farragut or the one in Cedar Bluff?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
This one is
Off of Campbell Station Road? That's in Farragut.
Yeah, never mind. I'm thinking the wrong side.
Okay.
The other one is down Park, almost to low. It's right outside of your city limits, but we are sitting a pole there.
Side?
Yes, but it's further on. I've got my nodes mixed up. It's on the far end of there, right after you. It's not real far outside of your city limits, but it's outside of your city limits.
I think it's over near the Calhoun's on Parkside Drive.
Yeah, I think so.
That area.
Yeah.
Just
We're sitting a
outside
new
town.
pole there. It'll be a 35.5 foot pole.
Okay.
They're steel.
Our limit must be 36.
Well, I have no further questions.
Well, I got a question. Your recommendation is that they had more detailed site-specific plans for submittal. We're going to make it contingent upon that? It's your recommendation, but is the wording strong enough that we're going to have what you need?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be. I mean, they're matching, like I say, the existing pole height, and then they've got details on the underground vault and the antenna placement. So they've got the majority of the information we need. It's mainly just at the ground level, you know, where can it physically, the vault, go and not create a conflict with utilities
Okay.
and that kind of thing.
As long as you're
So,
satisfied, I'm satisfied.
Yeah,
And
I'm satisfied
As
with
Mark
it.
said, we'll actually do a pre-con walk on each one of these sites, because as you know, sometimes what's on a set of prints, when you get out there on a set of CDs, you may have to shift something around a little bit. To get to this point where we're at with the CDs, certain things we couldn't design. We couldn't design the pole foundation because we didn't know which pole we were going to go with, things like that. But to Mark's point, they will match exactly what's in that agreement.
Okay.
So we don't need another motion, we just need to vote at this point?
Yeah.
If all discussion is closed, then it's time for a vote.
In that case, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very much. Thank you for your time.
To ordinances, and the first one is a second reading of ordinance 17-01, an ordinance to amend the text of the municipal code of the town of Farragut, Tennessee by amending Title 8, Alcoholic Beverages, Chapter 1, Intoxicating Liquors, Section A is Section 8-101, Definitions, and B, 102, Alcoholic Beverages Regulations, Chapter 2, Beer, Section 8, 206, 5, Definitions, and Section 8, 218, 4, A, and E, to amend the maximum square footage for Class 4 on-premise tavern permit, the casual panked applicant.
Yes, sir. At the January 26th meeting, the board made a motion to change the maximum square footage from 3,000 to 3,500 square feet. The board also added the item E, which is new permits issued after February 16, 2017 are required to sell food, in addition to meeting the other requirements of the restrictions of this chapter. The ordinance also includes changes to the definition of beer as defined by the state to change the percentage of weight from 5% to 8%. The changes are highlighted in your packets, and the motion is to approve ordinance 1701 on second and final reading.
I move that we approve ordinance 1701 on second and final reading.
I'll second it.
All in favor say aye.
Well, let's have a little discussion.
Yes.
I have you guys know that I had some concerns about just saying food and not tying a percent of food sales to it. Are you comfortable? This is my question. Are you comfortable with the language as is going to provide what we think probably needs to be happening in our taverns going forward, which is they need food service. They don't need just popcorn and pretzels. They need,
Pickled pig's feet.
yes, food that's going to fill you up. And do you think that this particular, as we're laying it out, is sufficient enough language to communicate that? Is that going to be enough to require someone to provide food as opposed to just pretzels and popcorn and calling it a day?
When you start requiring a business to have to sell something or do something, I think we're over-governing a little bit. I understand
Yeah.
they need to sell food. I agree with that. And I'm glad we're not putting a percentage on it.
Well, I'll just as a aside, because I did look up other communities, and they tie it for restaurant foods, but they specifically do tie it to a percentage of their. Let me see where I can read this. Collierville has a requirement if you're going to sell, and they're a restaurant. They don't have a tavern, but they say 70% of gross revenues of the establishment be from food sales. And the other one that I could find that tied food sales was in, there it is, Nolansville. And theirs is, it says, no permit for on-premises beer consumption shall be granted or approved unless the applicant's business for which it is seeking a beer permit derives at least 65% of its gross income from the sale of food prepared on the business premises to be consumed on the business premises. So it's not unheard of to tie it to a percentage of food sales. And as a liquor license, you are required, when you get a liquor license, if you are a limited sales restaurant is what it's called, limited service restaurant, 0 to 14%, your permit is $5,000, 15 to 19% is $4,000, and it goes on from there. So clearly this has been thought of, it's not I mean, I know it's an extra accounting thing, but it's not difficult to sort out when you're doing your business where you're getting your money from, particularly if you're a limited service restaurant and you're paying a permit fee. You're going to want to be breaking that out so you know how much you're supposed to be paying annually. So I understand what you're saying, but are we communicating through this that we expect more than popcorn and pretzels? And can we tie someone? We can't, by simply saying food sales, we can't dictate to them by that what we consider food. That is my concern. And that's not something that I'm trying to overregulate. That is what the town of Farragut residents have indicated through how Dr. O'Brien's business goes up when he has a food truck there. The town of Farragut residents are telling us they want if we're going to have taverns, it better have some food. And it better not just be popcorn and pretzels. So I guess that's my question to you. Is that enough to say even that for the market is dictating, someone comes up here and says, well, I want to have a tavern, I just want to serve popcorn and pretzels. Are we going to say, look, your business isn't going to survive? Is it enough that the market is telling them that that's what they have to do?
Well, I think the market can sort that out pretty quickly. I don't know that we need to tell them what percent of food needs to be served in a tavern. I think we have two different things here. We have a restaurant that wants to serve alcohol. That's one thing. Then you have a tavern. We have a specific ordinance for a tavern, which these other towns apparently don't. So what is a tavern? A tavern is a place where you go and consume alcoholic beverages. And I would think that if the patrons of these establishments want food there and can't get it there, they're going to go someplace else. And I think that that's really something that the operator of that establishment needs to determine. Okay. It seems to me logically that would be, if they're not going to survive, if they're not serving food, I think they're going to be serving food.
Okay.
I think that was already determined by the casual pains. So
All right.
That's why he wants to expand his kitchen, I think.
I'm beating a dead horse. I understand that, but I just...
Well, the other two places also serve food, and evidently both of them have a certain amount of food sales already. That's whatever percentage it might be. I don't know that we know, but evidently it's enough that they're going to keep on doing it, and that their customers feel that that's an added value item for them. So,
just wanted clarity on that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for raising the question. That is, I'm glad we had some discussion on it, because I feel more clear on what it is exactly we're doing. So I don't have any more questions.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Passes. And the next one is a first reading ordinance to amend Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 4, section, 20? Parking and loading to provide for new requirements.
This item is part of the kind of a continuing effort to try to implement certain aspects of our architectural design standards that we adopted almost 2 years ago now. And we've been working with the Planning Commission on building and site-related aspects of the standards. and trying to consider whether we needed to make any amendments to any of our regulations. One of the site-related standards that we've been looking at is, and that we passed some ordinances fairly recently on, was how to soften the visual and functional impact of surface parking. As you may remember, we made some amendments to our commercial zoning district and our office zoning district to allow more flexibility in building placement, to give people the opportunity to move buildings up closer to the street, to kind of hide the parking a little bit if they so chose to do that, providing for some screening, landscaping around surface parking, and increasing the interior island width so that you have a better opportunity for shade trees in the parking lots to do better. This item is kind of a continuation of that, and it really looks at a larger question of how surface parking is allocated, and what are the land use and really financial questions and impacts to the town in relation to surface parking. When we went through these things at the workshop sessions with the Planning Commission, we just took some aerial images of, and we're not picking on any, this could be any site anywhere, but we looked at a number of sites in the town and just looked at their parking lots and how much they were being used or not used. Again, these are just different locations. And I think when you go to most of these sites, most of the time, you're going to find that their parking is not fully being used. That's just to give you some visuals as a background of why we're even considering this at this time. Not only are there visual impacts to having a lot of surface parking and stormwater impacts, but there's really financial impacts. These properties that we looked at are high dollar real estate. And, if you're devoting a lot of your real estate to something that's rarely being used, is that really an efficient use of land? So what we were trying to do here, with the understanding that the town is increasingly having less and less property that can be developed for commercial and office use. So, we need to be very smart and efficient with how that remaining land is being used. So what we're trying to do in this ordinance is to provide applicants with more flexibility to be able to petition for a reduction in parking if they can demonstrate that based on, their needs, their demonstrated needs, they don't need as much parking as is required by the town. Or in the case of somebody that's requesting a lot more parking than the town requires, then they need to be able to demonstrate why they need that additional parking, and then provide for aesthetic and stormwater related improvements to the site that would address that impact. So what some of the things that we have built into this rewrite of Chapter 20 in our zoning ordinance are, let me just go through some of the highlights of the ordinance itself, and then we can get back to some of these images, or if you have some questions on how this could apply to individual sites, and I can walk you through that a little bit. Again, we're just trying to make people think about how they're using physical space, and is it a smart use of the space? And what we're trying to do is provide the regulatory ability to have that kind of flexibility. So in the rewrite of this, we are making the sections easier to find, adding headings in the sections so that you can find what you're looking for more easily. Providing for flexibility to be able, as I mentioned earlier, to reduce parking. We've got an applicant that probably will be coming to the Planning Commission in the near future where our requirements, our parking space requirements, would make them provide 6 more parking spaces than they than they feel that they need, and they can demonstrate that they don't need that. So what this ordinance does is provides them with the ability and the flexibility to lower that count. We provide for standards to justify excess parking. You can have more parking than is required. You just have to demonstrate why you're wanting to do that and do some things on the site. We provide an opportunity for compact car parking. It's not something that someone has to do, but there may be an entity that wants to come to the town that wants to designate a portion of their parking lot for smaller cars, and this language would provide for that. We looked at parking space dimensions, aisle width dimensions, to think about, are the dimensions appropriate? Are they comparable to what we see in other communities? We've slightly narrowed some of the parking space dimensions. Again, these are minimums. Somebody can still provide a 10-foot wide parking space if they want to, but we're giving them a little bit more flexibility with regards to that. Providing for more opportunities to share parking. That's another thing that's an efficient use of land that we don't really do much at all. For example, the Chili's on Parkside Drive, they have a bank next door and they have an office building. There's plenty of off-hour parking that could be shared between all those uses. And that's, an efficient use of that land. We provide some language in there about on-street parking. We don't have anything in there currently except in our town center district. And then we have some language on turning radius requirements that really reflect our current practice on turning radiuses, so that people don't design something that encourages you to come into a shopping center on two wheels. It kind of forces you to slow down. And that also provides for safer pedestrian crossings. So that language is new. This whole section is new. It's, replaces our existing section. But the bottom line is what we're trying to do is to get people to thinking about how they're using parking. Is it what you really need? Are there opportunities to do something smarter with your property? There's some sites in the town. You look at some of these, you could add another building out there that would be generating tax dollars for the community, and you wouldn't need to add any more parking. But we don't have that kind of flexibility currently in our ordinance to allow for that. So that's kind of an overview. If you all have any questions or you want to talk about any specific sites, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Well, I first want to acknowledge you, Mark, and staff for taking this on and being proactive in addressing what is really almost a blight on the country, just the over paving of so much green space and permeable surface. So I certainly want to acknowledge you in that effort. And the only time I can ever remember having a hard time finding a parking space at a retail place in West Knox County was before Turkey Creek was ever even there. So it's been 10, 15 years ago. Was at West Town Mall Christmas week, and had to kind of fight for a parking place there. But that's so that is a very rare occasion. Looking at more flexible ways. So I make a motion that we approve ordinance 16-27 on the first reading.
Second.
I have some issues that I'd like to bring up.
Absolutely.
First of all, I commend you. I really like what you've done here, but I have an issue with, on page 5, item 4, the second sentence, where it says allocation shall not be based on selected dates where parking demands are atypical in comparison to the remainder of the year. I spent 35 years in retail, and the company I worked for, Hallmark Cards, the card shops, throughout the year, 9 months out of the year, they pretty much break even. Some months they lose money, some months they made a little. All of their profit was made in about 6 weeks. There was a week in February, the week before Valentine's, week around Thanksgiving, and the 4 weeks in December around Christmas. And traffic is very high at that time. And so you're asking here, an allocation shall not be based on, what was it, atypical,
Selected dates.
selected dates. And I think we got to be very sensitive to that. And as Alderman Markley said, at Christmas time, the mall's busy. I know the Pinnacle over in Turkey Creek. I hate to shop in that area during Christmas. I can't find a parking spot in there. So it's really important to some of these businesses, if all their profit is made in 6 or 7 weeks, and we're limiting them on the amount of parking spaces that are available to them, it's going to really hurt their business. So I don't know if we should strike that one sentence or change it, but I'm concerned about that.
Anybody else?
That's how we ended up with JCPenney being such a massive, huge parking lot that we could have fit another building on it. I don't think we have a lack of parking problem anywhere. And we think about our shops that we currently have. Most of them are in strip malls, so there's basically a lot of shared parking going on. I personally prefer it because every time I drive by JCPenney's, it hurts that we have such an enormous amount of space that is not utilized. And just for like 1 day or 2 days a year that it may be full, it's shameful that we have that much space allocated for parking and we don't have another building there that could be sharing some of that. In the end, what we're doing is we're hurting ourselves we have one business that we're trying to help, and one day the parking might be bad, but 364 days, the rest of the days of the year, it's empty. And we could be having another building there sharing that parking. So I understand what you're saying, but that's not an issue we have in this town.
Well, again, I think it's you got to look at each business, and if a business is coming to us and saying, I need, whether it be a small business or a big one. But for example, the Hallmark shop in the Pinnacle is in a corner, and that parking lot is full at Christmas time, and they need traffic moving through quickly. And that's not in Farragut, but I'm just using that as an example. It's hurting their business.
Well, if you look at the parking allocations, they haven't changed at all. Our original parking allocations haven't changed at all. So
You can overpark a site. The language does allow for you to overpark, but you have to provide certain things to address that impact. For example, you can go up to 10% over the required amount of parking. You don't have to do anything. But beyond that, for every 5 additional parking spaces above what would be required, then you do have to provide an additional landscaped island, and then you start getting into some kind of permeable surface product for the parking lot, for that portion of the parking lot. So you can do it, but you have to provide certain performance measures to address that visual and stormwater impact. Plus, we're also trying to get people, again, thinking about parking and looking for ways to share parking. Like the Chili's is a classic example. I mean, those uses that are adjacent to them have different peak hours of customers and patrons. So that would be a prime place for employees to park over there at one of those office or bank facilities, and then the customers could utilize the Chili's parking lot. So again, we're trying to get people to thinking about the use of land and try not to base the use of physical space on 1 or 2 days a year that are frankly atypical of how the majority of the year is going to be in terms of how that space is being used. And I don't know you make a good point. I don't know how you really address that.
Alderman Pinchak raises a really good point. It is atypical, but their business model is they need parking on those atypical days, or they're going to suffer, because those are their profit days. And I'm wondering, it makes me think we've got all this space out here. and we see it sitting idle 360 days of the year. Can we look at some more creative ways to use that? Mobile vendors, we talked about food trucks, things that could be on there that during certain times of the year. Boy Scout fundraising campaigns, Girl Scout cookie sales. I mean, there's so many different uses of that. We got space out here. There's probably somebody who wants to use it and could generate some tax revenues off of it.
I'm all for reducing parking. I'm all for it. I just don't want to see a business hurt. We're trying everything we can do to avoid, businesses going dark.
Yeah.
And if there's just some way in that one sentence to maybe change the language a little bit to be a little bit more sensitive to the needs of a particular business is all I was asking.
We have a conundrum, I think.
I obviously have made my position clear. The standard parking allotment is what's standard in the industry. We have not changed that. That is still what we're relying on, and quite frankly, I think they do those studies, and it's generous in the parking that they're allotted. We're not telling them that you can't have extra spots, but we are tying that to something.
Would it be helpful if we took that one sentence out? Try to read it without that sentence.
I'm sorry.
If we took that one sentence out, how do you feel about that?
Which sentence?
The second sentence.
The sentence that starts with allocations shall not be based. If you read the whole paragraph.
Is it that sentence and the following
No,
sentence?
just that one sentence.
An applicant, so you would leave an applicant shall be responsible for providing such documentation. I don't know that.
Yeah, it's nice that a site could be tailored to the tenant, but of course then you also have to think what happens if that tenant moves on and then you've got a building that's got insufficient parking for a different application.
Yeah, and we've thought about that. I mean,
Have we had any issues where a business actually went out, they closed their doors because of parking? Are we aware of
Aubrey's
any?
complained about
Aubrey's
parking,
suffered.
but
Audrey's, yeah,
he
but
built
that's
that
not the
building
reason.
there and grew so much that it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that wasn't a limitation from Farragut. That was a limitation from the land itself. You couldn't fit any more parking there.
Well, he also owned the property across the street.
Right, but that's a hard street to cross.
yeah.
I just want to be
for employee
sensitive.
parking.
I just want to be sensitive to this. I don't know that there's anything that's ever going to come of needing to expand or have more parking,
Well,
but
that's a good
I just
point,
know from
yeah.
my experience, it has in the past affected some of the businesses that I dealt with through the years. And so the best thing was to make sure that any store we put in was not in a corner somewhere where there was next to a big box store like a Walmart or a Kroger or something, so there were plenty of parking spaces around, not just what they were expected to have. But again, it's maybe a moot point, but it just when I read that one sentence, it got me.
Well, I think we could take that sentence out and it not really affect the intent of that paragraph. I mean, I think it might take a little bit
Let me try to.
of the specifics out, but it still, I think, makes the same point.
Read it out loud without that sentence.
All right.
Where an applicant requests to increase or reduce parking from the minimum number of required off-street parking spaces, such request shall be based on demonstrated parking demands that are typical for the proposed uses throughout the majority of the year. An applicant shall be responsible for providing such documentation, and this documentation shall be current and part of the site plan submittal. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think the intent.
To you?
Intent is still addressed,
Okay.
I think, with that.
You're always going to have the situation where, like, the Pinnacle's underparked and Penny's is overparked. I mean, it's something that's going to happen.
Breaks my heart, but I get it. So how do we we have to amend our motion to remove?
A motion's been made, it's been seconded, and we have to vote on that, and then we'll have to amend it.
Actually, you'll vote on an amendment. So somebody would need to request to amend the ordinance
Okay.
or make a motion to amend based on taking that sentence out in a second. Vote on that, and then you'll vote on the rest of the
All right.
ordinance.
So, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I'll make a motion that we amend this with the removal of that sentence.
That sentence being, can you
The
read that?
allocation shall not be based on selected dates where parking demands are atypical in comparison to the remainder of the year.
I second Alderman Pinchok's motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. And the next will be,
So do we need to, do we need to vote on the whole thing now?
The ordinance now,
Because
correct.
Okay. So we still have a motion and a second on that one, so we just need to have a vote on
go
that one.
through with discussion.
I have no more questions.
I have none one.
Discussion
All in
is
favor,
closed.
say aye.
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 Yeah, this.
This is more fun like this. Everybody gets a chance to talk.
That's nice.
And we're already up to the town administrator's report.
Mayor, I have a report that this week we just received notice from the Government Finance Officers Association that we received the budget award for the third straight year in our budget submittals. All the credit goes to Allison Myers and her staff, as well as our department heads for putting together all the documents that need to go a part of that. So big kudos to Allison. Great job, as usual, on getting that budget award this year. The other thing is that in the next couple of weeks, you've seen a lot of art going up at Town Hall over the last couple of weeks. Right now, we've got the Black History Month exhibit. Next week, we're going to have an open juried fine arts show that the Arts Council is going to be putting together. February the 15th is the first day those will be up. They'll be jurying those, and they'll have a best in show, first, second, and third place. And they actually have a reception next Friday night on February 17th from 5 to 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. So if anybody's interested in coming to that, that'll be going on Friday from 5 to 7. And with that, that's all the updates I have tonight.
Congratulations, Allison.
Thank you.
You put together a very pretty budget.
A lot of fun.
We actually have an attorney here to report tonight.
Unfortunately for you, the attorney has no report.
We like to hear that.
Breaks my heart.
In that case, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, come on.
That's all right. He's entitled.
Already got it.
Contract for Ralph to sign? Or David Sparks said you were bringing a contract?
It's in the car.